8 years ago, after one reckless night, I became pregnant with Grayson Ulrich's child. From that moment, he began to resent both me and our daughter. He never allowed her to call him Dad. I didn't expect much from him after that, but the realization that they couldn't even pretend to care about the child we had created together. It was like a slap. He didn't even look at her. Not really, not the way a father should. I remember the first time she tried to call him Dad. She was only one, toddling around in that little dress, her smile so wide it nearly split her face. She stretched her arms up to him, and when he ignored her, her lip quivered. She looked to me for an answer. What was I supposed to say? I told her it was nothing, that it was okay. But I knew then, she was never going to have the kind of love a child needs from her father. Grayson had always been distant, but that distance grew when he moved into his study. It became his sanctuary. I could tell it wasn't just the hours of work he spent there, or the phone calls he took in a voice that I couldn't quite hear. It was the way he refused to let anyone in, especially me. The study was his private world, his retreat from everything us. And I understood, in some twisted way, that it wasn't just about work. It was about her, Sandra. Sandra Wright was the woman he couldn't get over. She'd left him run off to marry some rich guy, and he was still holding on to that. He never said it, not outright, but I could feel it. The ghost of her hovered in that room like a shadow everywhere he went. When he drank, it was because of Sandra. When he went quiet, it was because of Sandra. The way he looked at her old picture, he could never stop missing her. I remember the first time I dared to ask about her. He looked at me with eyes so cold, it froze the words in my mouth. Sandra. Why do you care about Sandra? His voice was a whip, sharp and cutting. And I knew then, I was never going to get any answer that would make sense. But it wasn't the memories that drove me away. It was the way he treated Alicia. How could I stay in that house, pretending we were a family, when he couldn't even look at his own daughter? The first time she tried to draw a picture of Dad for him, she was only 5, it tore me apart. She handed it to him at his birthday party, all excited, her little hands shaking as she offered it to him. She called it her trophy. Her way of trying to get his approval. He looked at true drawing, at the shaky handwriting spelling out Dad, and he just walked away. She didn't speak for 6 months after that. So, when Sandra showed up again, I should have expected it. Of course it would crumble. Of course it would break him all over again. He got drunk that night, the first time in years. He cried, clutching Alicia in his arms like he hadn't seen her a decade. And she looked at me, eyes wide, confused. And I had to tell her that it was okay, that it was because he was happy, because the woman he loved had come back. That was the moment I knew. I had to leave. I didn't tell Alicia at first. I couldn't. She was too young, and I didn't want to break her heart. But when I saw her clinging to me that night, asking if Uncle Grayson really liked her now, after all the years of rejection, I knew. She wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, he could finally be the dad she'd always needed. But I wasn't going to let her hang on to a hope that would only break her further. So, I made up my mind. I packed our things, made the arrangement, told her we were going to Italy. A place where I could rebuild, where we could start fresh, and where Alicia could study under Master Danny, someone who would see her talent and not just her broken heart. We left that night. Before I could leave the house, I wrote down the divorce papers, and then, when I was at the airport, just before we boarded the plane, I turned my phone off. The last message from Grayson flashed on the screen. How did the competition go? I bought a skateboard. Tomorrow, I'll take you both to a children's restaurant to celebrate. I didn't reply. I had already made my decision. It wasn't about him more. It wasn't about any of it. It was about me, about Alicia, and the future I was going to fight for, one that didn't include Grayson Ulrich. It didn't take long for me to realize how much I had been carrying for so long. The weight of everything, Grayson's coldness, Alicia's year or something that wasn't coming. The knowing feeling that no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't fix any of it had built up so much over the year, had to make this work for Alicia. I kept telling myself that. I had to. But the first week in Italy, when we finally settled into a tiny apartment just outside Florence, the reality hit hard. It wasn't just about the new life we were building. It was about leaving everything behind. Grayson's absence, Sandra's shadow, the weight of the past that followed me like a ghost. Alicia loved it here. She was bright-eyed, inspired by the city's art, the atmosphere, the chance to escape everything. She dove into her sketchbooks, pouring herself into her drawings, She was so full of life, so willing to adapt, even as I could the ache of loss settle in her bones every time I looked at her. It didn't matter how many smiles I forced, how many trips we took to the gallery or the market, or couldn't fill the space where her father's love should have been. Her art started to blossom in ways I hadn't seen before. She poured her feelings onto the canvas, capturing a world of unspoken pain and beauty that only I could understand. But I couldn't help her with the other part. The part where she would ask me, sometimes in the dead of night, why Uncle Grayson didn't care. Why he didn't love her the way other fathers loved her to understand. How could she? He was her uncle, but in her eyes, he was the one person who could have loved her, who could have been the father she'd dreamed about, even though she never had the words for it. I'd tell her that it wasn't her fault. That her dad had a lot of things to figure out. That she was perfect just the way she was. I said all the things mothers say when they can't explain something they don't understand themselves. But then I'd hear her whisper to herself when she thought I wasn't listening, maybe one day he'll change. And that's when it hurt the most. Because no matter how much I told her he would never change, no matter how much I tried to prepare her, I still saw that hope in her eyes. The same hope that Grayson would one day see her as his. I kept telling myself it wasn't my fault. That I wasn't the one who had failed her. I wasn't the one who had turned away. But every time she asked me, "Do you think he'll come around?" my heart broke a little more. The day I got the news about Master Danny's apprenticeship opportunity, I thought for a moment that maybe we had a chance to start fresh. The idea of Alicia studying under someone so skilled, someone who truly saw her talent, it felt like a lifeline. I couldn't help but feel a surge of relief, the kind you get when you finally see a way out of the fog. She was so excited when I told her. Her eyes lit up, the sparkle I hadn't seen in years. But I knew, too, that this wasn't just about her art. This was about me, too. About us both getting out of the shadow of the past and into a future that was ours. But that night, right after we had made the decision to stay in Ellie for her, I got the message from Grayson. "How did the competition go?" "I bought a skateboard. Tomorrow, I'll take you both to a children's restaurant to celebrate." I stared at the phone for a long time. It felt like a cruel joke. After all this time, after the way he'd treated Alicia, now he wanted to suddenly play the part of the loving father. It didn't make sense. Alicia had been begging him for that dinner for years, and he had refused every time. Now, when we had already made the decision to leave, he was trying to make amends, trying to step in as if he could make up for all the years in absence and neglect. My heart twisted. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? She deserved so much more than this last-minute respond. Instead, I focused on Alicia. I told her we were staying. That Italy would be our home now, a place where she could chase her dreams. I wanted to believe it too. The next morning, after everything settled in my mind, I told her about Master Denny's apprenticeship and she was elated. But there was a quiet undercurrent in her joy, an unease that I couldn't shake. She still didn't know that we were leaving behind everything she ever known. When I saw her face light up with that excitement, when I saw her painting in the garden, her hands smudged with colors from her latest creation, I realized something. No matter how hard I tried to give her everything, no matter how many promises I made, I couldn't change the fact that she had already lost so much. But I had to keep going, for her. I had to be the one who made sure she never lost herself completely to the past. She deserved so much more than the broken pieces we'd been left with. But the hardest part, the part I couldn't make her understand, was that I had already decided we were never going back. Even if it meant breaking her heart, even if it meant giving up any hope that Grayson might someday change. The first time I saw Sandra again, it felt like the world tilted on its axis. She hadn't changed much, still the same pristine beauty, the same effortless elegance. She was standing in the lobby when we walked in, holding hands with Grayson's son, her smile wide, that unmistakable air of triumph surrounding her. It was like nothing had ever happened, like 8 years hadn't passed. Grayson had no idea how much he dreaded this moment. Sandra wasn't just his ex-fiancée. She was the one who had gotten away, the one he never really let go of. And there she was, back in his life, just as effortlessly as she had walked out. I stood there for a moment, frozen, as Alicia tugged on my sleeve. "Mom, who's that?" she asked, her voice small, uncertain. I looked down at her, but I couldn't find the words to explain. How could I explain what Sandra represented? The ghost of every moment Grayson had ever wished for something else, something more, something better than us. Someone from the past, I finally said, forcing a smile. It was a weak answer, but Alicia seemed to accept it. For a second I thought maybe we could get through this, pretend like everything was fine. But Grayson's voice, thick with emotion, cut through the moment, shaking me out of my reverie. He was walking toward us now, his eyes slightly red, his movement slow, like someone walking through fog. I braced myself for the inevitable. He didn't even glance at me when he approached. He only saw Alicia, his daughter. My heart broke in that instant watching him. He scooped her up, holding her tight, and she didn't resist. She let him. She didn't know yet what it would cost her. I swallowed the lump in my throat and watched them, Alicia, while Sandra stood nearby, watching us like she had every right to be there, every right to claim this moment. "Mom, why is Uncle crying?" Alicia asked quietly, her smile reaching for me. I closed my eyes for a moment. I had promised myself I wouldn't lie to her, but I also couldn't shatter her world in an instant. I didn't want her to see the pain in my eyes, the truth in my voice. "Because he's happy. The person he loves has come back," I whispered, though they're like knives in my chest. It wasn't just a lie. It was a betrayal. We stayed for a few more minutes, though I couldn't bring myself to look at Grayson. His eyes were full of something I couldn't quite read: desperation, longing, regret. But mostly it was just emptiness. I couldn't stand to watch it any longer. "Let's go, Alicia," I said softly. "We don't want to disturb your uncle." As we walked out, Alicia turned to me, her face full of confusion. "Mom, do we really have to leave?" she asked. I could hear the vulnerability in her voice, the uncertainty that only a child could express so openly. "He's happy now, sweetheart. He doesn't need us anymore," I said, though the words tasted bitter. I didn't want to take her away from him, but I knew, deep down, we didn't belong in that house. We never had. She sniffled, clutching a small scarf Grayson had given her earlier. "Uncle gave me a gift today. That means he likes me, right?" "The scarf." I wanted to laugh, but it caught in my throat. It was nothing more than a store freebie, something that canned handbag he bought for someone else. But Alicia didn't know that. She didn't know how little it meant. I kissed her forehead, my voice soft but firm. "It doesn't mean that, sweetheart. It's just a thing." Alicia didn't say anything, but I saw the flicker of hope in her eyes before it disappeared behind a veil of confusion. She didn't understand, not yet. How could she? How could she understand that Grayson's love wasn't just something that could be given on a whim, like a toy or a scarf? That it wasn't something that could be bought or earned? We got back to the apartment that evening, and I tried to make it seem like we were still okay. But I knew we weren't. I knew that even though we were safe here, in Italy, away from all the pain Grayson had caused, Alicia would carry the weight of his neglect in her heart. It wasn't something that could be erased by distance or time. I tucked Alicia into bed that night, holding her close as she curled into me, seeking comfort. I kissed her forehead, my fingers brushing through her hair. "You know you're my world, right?" I whispered, even though I was starting to wonder how much of the world I had left to give. She nodded sleepily, her little hand clutching mine. But the ache inside me, the hollow feeling that had been growing since I first realized Grayson wasn't ever going to change, it was still there. And for the first time, I couldn't tell if I was holding her together, or if she was holding me. The first week in Italy had passed in a blur, a haze of adjusted the newness of it all, new city, new life, new hope. But no matter how many art galleries we visited or quaint cafes we explored, the shadow of Grayson's absence, no, his rejection lingered. Alicia threw herself into her art, as I'd hoped. Every sketch, every line she drew seemed to be her way of filling the emptiness. As if she could create a world that made sense out of had never quite fit her. She had a gift, there was no doubt about that. Her eyes, those wide, hopeful eyes, shone brighter than they had in years. But sometimes, when she spoke about Grayson, when she asked me if he missed her, or if he was thinking about her, I could see the cracks in her smile. It was a small, quiet thing, but it was there. We were in our tiny kitchen one morning, sipping espresso while I cut through a stack of paperwork for her school registration when the phone buzzed on the counter. Grayson's name flashed on the screen. I froze. I hadn't heard from him since we left. It had been nearly 2 months. I didn't know what I expected, but it wasn't this. I had told myself I'd let him go, that we were beyond this. But the truth was more complicated than that. I had never stopped hoping. Hoping that, just maybe, One day he would wake up and realize what he had lost. But that was a lie I kept feeding myself, and I wasn't sure I could keep pretending anymore. Alicia was at the table, her head bent over a drawing, humming to herself. She hadn't noticed the phone yet. I stood there, the phone in my hand, feeling the weight of it like a 1,000-pound stone. What was I supposed to do? I pressed my thumb against the screen, answering it before I could change my mind. Hello. My voice was steady, but I could feel the tremor underneath. Hey. Grayson's voice came through the phone, low, and he wasn't sure if he had the right to call, but he did it anyway. How's everything? Is Alicia okay? The words should have been normal, expected even. But they felt wrong. It was too little, too late, and I hated myself for the rush of hope that bubbled up in my chest, uninvited. We're fine, I said, my voice clipped. Alicia's adjusting. He was silent for a moment, and I knew he was probably trying to figure out what to say. He always was. Even when we were married, he could never seem to find the right words. He never seemed to try. And here he was, trying to bridge a gap that had grown too wide, too deep, for him to even begin to comprehend. Is she still? Joyne asked, his voice soft. I remember how much she loved it. She's very talented, I said, forcing the words out. But I'm sure you already knew that. Another long pause. I could almost hear the regret hanging in the air. It didn't matter. Regret wasn't enough anymore. Regret wouldn't fix the years he'd wasted, the years he'd stolen from her. From us, I missed her, he finally said, and I didn't know how to respond. I swallowed hard. Grayson, you don't get to miss her. Not now, not after everything. I saw Alicia glance up, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, her eyes flicking between me and the phone. I could see the hope in her eyes before she even knew what I was saying. I didn't want to crush it. I couldn't. But it had to be said. She needed to hear it, even if it hurt. You made your choice, I said, my voice low but firm. You've been gone for too long, Grayson. And you weren't there when it mattered. I was trembling now, the anger and sadness bubbling up all at once. He had been ghost in our lives for so long, I didn't even know who he was anymore. I didn't know who I was, either, when he was around. But I knew one thing for sure. He didn't get to waltz back in like nothing had happened. I'm sorry, Harper. I know I've screwed up, but I'm done, I interrupted. My words toned through the silence between us. We're done. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep waiting for you to change. You've broken Alicia's heart more times than I can count. And you've broken mine too. There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear his breath, steady but strained. Like he wanted to say something more but couldn't. I hear it. I had heard enough. I'm taking Alicia to see Master Danny. She's going to study art here in Italy. We're staying and leaving. His voice cracked, and I hated myself for the moment of guilt that hit me. But I didn't want to feel sorry for him anymore. I've already left, Grayson, I whispered. The finality leaned me like a blow to the chest. I ended the call before he could respond. My hands were shaking, and I felt like I had just made the hardest decision of my life, even though I had known it was coming for so long. Alicia was staring at me, her eyes wide and uncertain. Mom, is Uncle Grayson okay? I knelt down beside her, brushing the hair from her face, my heart twisting at the sight of her. She had no idea what she was asking. She had no idea what I wanted to say, that everything would be okay. That one day, Grayson would be the father she deserved. But I couldn't lie to her anymore. No, sweetheart, my voice breaking. He's not okay, but we are. We will be. I kissed her forehead, holding her tight, praying that spite of everything, I could give her the life she deserved. A life where she didn't have to rely on the man who never been there for her. We were leaving him behind for good. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally ready to let go. The days slipped by in a steady rhythm of quiet moments and smockeries. Alicia's art blossomed in ways I hadn't expected. She was fearless now, letting her emotions pour into every line she drew. It was like the weight of her past, of the man who had never been there for her, melted away in every stroke of her pencil, every brush of color. I watched her grow, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe we had made the right choice, moving here. Maybe Italy could be the fresh start we needed. The small apartment was a far cry from the house we'd left behind, but it was ours. We made it ours. But as much as I tried to bury the past, it never stayed buried for long. The phone rang one morning as I was making breakfast. I almost didn't answer, but something in me hesitated. Maybe it was the silence that had become too loud, Or maybe it was the desperate hope that Grayson would call and somehow, miraculously, have changed. I didn't know, but when I saw the name on the screen, I froze. It wasn't Grayson this time, it was someone else. I answered it on instinct, my heart racing. Harper. The voice on the other end was calm, but there was something in it that made my blood run cold. This is Alicia's teacher. There's an issue with her application for the apprenticeship under Master Danny. My stomach dropped. Is there a problem? Well, no. Actually, there's a bit of good news. We just received word from Master Denny himself. He's very interested in Alicia's work. He wants to meet her before finalizing the apprenticeship. It's a rare opportunity, and I could hardly believe what I was hearing. Wait, so you mean Alicia actually got it? The apprenticeship? Yes, it looks like she has a real shot at it. Master Denny was impressed with her portfolio. This could be huge for her, Harper. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My eyes burned with unshed tears. Alicia had worked so hard for this. For something she could call her own, something that wasn't tied to the pain of her father's absence. Thank you, I managed to say, my voice shaking. This is everything she's dreamed of. The teacher's voice softened. It's more than just the art, Harper. Master Denny sees something in her. This is going to be a turning point. I hung up the phone and sat down on the couch, trying to collect myself. Alicia had a chance. This was it. The moment we had been waiting for. But as I wiped the tears away, something deep inside me twisted. Because I knew this wouldn't just be a turning point for Tuz. For me, too. This would change everything. It would pull us further away from Grayson. From everything that had held us back for so long. And for the first time, I realized I couldn't protect Alicia from the truth forever. The truth about Grayson. The truth about everything he had done. And as I looked out window at the winding streets of Florence, I knew that this was only the beginning. Whatever happened next, whatever choices we made, it was not or just about survival. It was about rebuilding. It was about carving out a future that had nothing to a man who had broken both of us. Alicia came into the room a moment later, holding a small sketchbook, her eyes wide with excitement. Mom, do you think I can really be his apprentice? I smiled, my heart swelling with pride. I know you can. She grinned, her face lighting up in that way that only children can. She didn't know how much this moment meant, how much I had sacrificed to get here. She didn't know what I had done to get us this far, but I didn't care, not right now. Right now, it was all about her future. But as she clung to me in that moment, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the decision ahead of us. Grayson was still out there, still somewhere in the shadows of our lives, and no matter how much I tried to protect Alicia from it, I knew that sooner or later, she would have to face the reality of who he was. I wasn't sure I was ready for that. I wasn't sure I was ready to let her go through what I had endured, but I knew I didn't have a choice. Mom, Alicia's voice broke through my thoughts. Are you okay? I pulled into my arms, holding her tight. I'm just so proud of you, I whispered. So proud, she smiled, and for the first time in a long while, I believed her. I believed in the possibility of a future that wasn't defined by loss, by Grayson, by the past. We had made it this far, and now, with Alicia's dream on the horizon, maybe, just maybe, we could finally start to build something new. Something just for us. I wasn't going to let anyone take that from her. Not anymore. The knock on the door came early that morning, too early. I had just finished making breakfast, the smell of fresh coffee filling the apartment, when the sound echoed through the small space. It wasn't the kind of knock you ignore. It wasn't a neighbor. It wasn't the postman. I knew who it was the moment I heard it. I opened the door, and standing there were two men in suits, one dark, one light. Both with serious, unreadable faces. They introduced themselves as officers, Harper Lane. The taller one asked, his voice steady, controlled. I nodded. Yes, that's me. Is something wrong? Are you aware that under arrest for corporate fraud and embezzlement? My blood ran cold. My heart stopped. What? You are under arrest for corporate fraud and embezzlement? Repeated. You have the right to remain silent. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The room seemed to tilt around me as if the floor had disappeared beneath my feet. I must have looked like a deer caught in headlights, because the officer stepped forward, his voice softening just a little. We need to take you in, ma'am. The charges are serious. Alicia's voice called from the kitchen, her footsteps going odder. Mom, what's going on? I didn't answer. My thoughts were a scramble. I had no idea how they'd gotten here, how my life could have come to this. I couldn't even process what they were saying. Fraud. Embezzlement. My mind flashed to the long hours I spent working at Ceylon Dynamics, to the stress, the late nights, the never-ending pressure. But I was no criminal. I had been the one catching the fraud. I had been the one cleaning up the messes the others left behind. I had been loyal always. But now, they were accusing me of the very thing I had sworn to expose. Alicia appeared in the doorway, her face still half lit by sleep, her eyes wide and confused. "Mom, what's happening?" The officer hesitated, clearly not prepared for the child be standing there. "We need to speak with your mother, young lady. You might want to know." Alicia cried, her voice a sharp burst of panic. "Mom, what's going on? Why are they here?" I didn't know how to explain it to her. I didn't know how to explain any of it to her. "Alicia, sweetheart, it's okay," I said, my voice trembling despite my efforts to sound calm. I just need to talk to them for a moment, okay?" She didn't move. She stood there frozen, watching the scene unfold like she didn't know if she should be scared or if she should run. I turned back to the officers, my mind still trying to process the words they had spoken, still trying to hold on to the fleeting sense of normalcy I'd worked so hard to create. This is a mistake," I whispered. "You have to be wrong. We've got the evidence, ma'am," the shorter officer said, his voice as hard as his gaze. "You've been under investigation for some time." I couldn't understand. There had to be a mistake. I'd worked late into the night on those spreadsheets. I had gone through every line, every transaction. I had caught mistakes before, discrepancies I'd fixed before they ever reached the higher-ups. No, this couldn't be real, not to me. Not after everything I had done to protect this company, to protect myself. "You don't understand," I said, my voice breaking. "I didn't take anything. I was just doing my job." "I'm afraid the evidence is clear," the taller officer said, his expression unchanged. "We'll need to take you in." I stood there, staring at him, numb. I wasn't even sure if I could walk. The whole world felt like it had collapsed in on me, folding in until I couldn't breathe. I turned to Alicia, who was still standing there, her eyes wide and lost. "Alicia, I need you to go to your room," I said, my voice all to whisper, "Please. Go." Her eyes flickered between me and the officers, her face fear, but she didn't move. "Mom, what's happening?" she asked again, her voice shaking. The panic in her voice broke me, and for a moment I couldn't speak. I couldn't answer her. All I could think about was how this was the last thing she deserved. The last thing I wanted to drag her into. "I'll be okay," I said, though I wasn't sure if I believed it. "Go to your route, please." Finally, she turned and walked away, though I could see her glance back at me, her eyes filled with confusion and fear. The officers moved quickly, following me as I turned to grab my coat. I didn't know what they thought, but I felt like I was suffocating. There was no way I could explain this. No way I could make them understand. I had spent my whole career making sure people like me, people who worked hard, who followed the rules, would never be caught in something like this. I had been careful. I had been thorough. So why was this happening? As they led me out of the apartment, the weight of it all began to crush me. I was being framed. I didn't know how, I didn't know why, but I knew this wasn't the end. It couldn't be. There had to be a way out. There had to be a way to prove I was innocent. But right now, all I could do was walk through the door. Walk away from the life I had fought so hard to build, and hope that somehow, some way, the truth would come out. But as I walked down the stairs to the car waiting outside, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was already too late. The holding cell was cold. Too cold for someone who hadn't done anything wrong. Or at least that's how I kept telling myself as I sat there, hands wrapped tightly around my knees, my back pressed against the concrete wall. The hum of fluorescent lights above was a constant buzz, a reminder that nothing felt real, that this wasn't supposed to be happening to me. They had processed me quickly, too quickly. There had been no time to breathe, no time to ask questions or get a lawyer. My head was spinning, my stomach tight with fear. But something else was creeping in, something darker, more familiar. It was the quiet fury of someone who knew they had been wronged. The kind of fury that made my fingers tremble with the need to do something, anything, to prove my innocence. But I couldn't act. I couldn't scream. I couldn't fight back, not here, not now. I had spent my entire career protecting the truth, fighting for the system to work, for the innocent to be protected. I had spent years as a forensic accountant, uncovering fraud, cleaning up messes that people like me should never have to touch. But this was a nightmare. This was a trap, and for a long time I sat there, letting the crushing weight of it all settle in, thinking about what had gone wrong. How had they gotten to me? I remembered the late nights at Silverline, poring over reports, making sure everything added up. I had worked tirelessly to keep everything above board, to keep the company running smoothly. But somehow, somewhere, someone had managed to twist my work into something else. Someone had set me up. I wasn't just a scapegoat. I wasn't just a casualty of bad timing. This was planned. I had to remind myself of that, because I knew deep down, there had to be more to this than a simple mistake. I had no doubt anymore. This was no accident. I wasn't known how to move money around, how to cover tracks. I'd been in the trenches of Silverline's finances, long enough the ins and outs of the system. And that's when it hit me. It wasn't just the fraud. It was the way it had been orchestrated. I had been framed. I stood up abruptly, the sharp sound scraping against the cold floor making me wince. The officer outside the cell glanced at me through me's expression unreadable. I paced back and forth for a few moments, the thoughts crashing through my mind like a storm. I needed to think. I needed to figure out who had done this, who manipulated the system in such a way that my name was on every transaction, every forged signature, every false approval, who had the power to bypass all of the security measures I had put in place. No one could have done this alone. I had trusted him. But now, the more I thought about it, the more it became clear. He was the one who had the access. He was the one who could have set me up, covered his tracks, and framed me. My stomach turned as I thought about it. The idea that my husband, the man I had loved, the father of my child, could have betrayed me in such a profound way. He had always been a man of control, of precision. If he'd wanted me out of the way, he would have done it methodically, cleanly. He would have manipulated the system to make sure there was no way out. And that's exactly what had happened. The evidence wasn't just planted, it was crafted. And Hoover this had made damn sure that I would be the one left holding the bag. I was snapped out of my thoughts by the sound of footsteps coming down the hallway. I didn't have to turn around to know who it was. The door to the cell opened with a clang, and the officer stepped inside, his eyes scanning me like I was an item on a list. "You've been served," he said flatly, tossing a small envelope onto the bench in front of me. I didn't move at first, my eyes focused on the envelope as though it might hold the key to everything. Finally, I stood and grabbed it, ripping it open with shaky hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper, an official-looking letter from Silverline. The words blurred in front of me as I read the first few lines, but then it hit me. It wasn't just a notice from my employer. It was something worse. It was a plea deal. The letter offered a bargain. If I pled guilty to the charges, I would avoid prison time. I would serve probation and pay restitution. The deal was designed to protect them, to save face in the public eye. But the more I read, the more it became clear. This wasn't just a legal maneuver. This was a way to bury the truth. This was the company, my own company, covering up the real fraud. They were using me as their scapegoat, using me as the perfect fall person. I felt a wave of nausea hit me, the weight of it all crashing down again, the betrayal, lies and manipulation. And now, they were asking me to take the fall for it all. But I wouldn't. I couldn't. I threw the letter onto the bench, my hands trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief. This was my chance to fix everything. I wasn't going to let them bury me in this. I had been now. I was going to make sure the truth came out. I had to. For me, for Alicia. For everything I had worked for. I wasn't going to let Noah or anyone else get away with it. Not this time. And somewhere deep inside, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years. A quiet resolve. A promise that no matter how dark this got, no matter how they tried to bury me, I would rise. I would fight. And I would win. The day of the meeting with Silverline's board felt fuckum, or maybe a nightmare. The high-rise building stood before me, just as I remembered it, all gleaming glass and polished steel. The city reflected in its surface like a picture, Prussian. But now, as I stepped through the lobby, everything felt different. I wasn't walking through it as an employee anymore. I was walking through it as someone who had been betrayed. Someone had been framed. I kept my head high, forcing my breath to stay steady. I wasn't sure if I was trying to convince myself or the world around me, but I wasn't scared anymore. Not like before. Before, I had been a small part of something much bigger, a cog in the machine. Now, I was the one holding the keys to unravel it. The elevator ride to the top floor was a quiet one, the clinking of my shoes against the marble floor in my ears as I approached the boardroom. As the doors slid open, I was hit with a wave of cold, sterile air, the kind of professional cold that came with million-dollar deals and high-stakes power plays. There they were. The board members. Evelyn, No's mother, sitting front and center with that look on her face that I knew all too well, a combination of practiced indifference and calculated control. And No, I had seen him at his best, his most charismatic, holding core meetings, making deals, all smiles and smooth talk. But now, standing there before him, seeing the way his jaw and his eyes cold, I realized how little he had ever really known me. The man who had promised me the world, the man who had married me, then betrayed me. It was clear he had never cared about me at all. Not really. No's gaze flickered to me as I walked in, and for a second, just a brief second, I saw something shift in his eyes: regret, guilt. Not yet. He wasn't sorry, he was terrified. And then the door shut behind me, sealing us all in. "You're a little late," Evelyn's voice cut through the silence, her words as sharp as a blade. She was always the one with the power, the one who'd held the strings from the beginning. She was the one who had backed No, who had always seen me as a nuisance, a problem to be dealt with. "I apologize," I said, my voice firm, my eyes not leaving hers, "but I think you'll find that I'm exactly on time." She raised an eyebrow but said nothing more, her eyes narrowing slightly. The board members were already murmuring, their whispers nothing more than a blur of disinterest to me. They didn't care about me. They didn't care about the truth. They only cared about their money. And the only reason I was there because they had no choice. They had no other option. No stood up, his voice forced when he spoke. "Harper, this isn't the way you wanted this to go. We're all just trying to move past this. For the company forever involved." I really laughed. The company. He didn't give a damn about the company. It was about control. It was always about control. About keeping everything under his thumb, making sure he looked the hero. But not anymore. "No," I said, my voice cutting through his rehearsed speech. "We're not going to pretend this is about the company. This is about you, No. You and your family and your little empire of lies." The room fell silent, all eyes on me. "You and your mother," Noah continued, "have been playing this game for years. You've been hiding the truth behind layers of manipulation and deceit. But it ends now." I saw the flicker of panic in his eyes, the way his fingers twitched at his side. But it wasn't enough to shake him. Not yet. I could see him trying to control himself. Trying to cling to whatever semblance of power he still thought he had. I turned to the board, letting my gaze sweep across their faces. "I know what happened. I know how you've all been involved in this. And I know that you all tried to bury me under this pile of lies. You thought I'd take the fall quietly, but I'm not that person anymore." One of the board members, an older man with graying hair, shifted in his seat, his eyes flickering with discomfort. But Evelyn, ever the puppet master, kept her eyes locked on me, her face like stone. "You think you're going to change this?" she sneered. "You think you can just walk in here and take control like nothing's happened? Like we'll all just forget?" "No," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not here to change anything. I'm here to make sure you pay for it. For everything you've done. For everything you've stolen. Because, in case you haven't noticed, the truth doesn't go away, not like you think it does." I pulled out a stack of papers from the briefcase I'd carried in, slamming them onto the table in front of them. "These are the files you tried to bury. The transactions you thought were hidden. The proof that you, No, and your mother orchestrated this whole thing." I watched as they all looked down at the papers, their faces draining of color as they realized what I was holding. The truth, the undeniable truth. No's face twisted with his hand slamming onto the table. "You're out of your mind. This isn't how it's supposed to go." "I know," I said, meeting his gaze. "But you've already lost, No. You've been caught. And now, the regulators are going to know everything." I paused for a wait, letting the weight of my words sink in, letting them feel the full force of the truth crashing down on them. "But don't worry," I added quietly, "I'm not here to destroy you. I'm not interested in ruining your life. But I will make sure you pay for what you've done. For what you did to me, to Alicia, to this company. And you never forget the name Harper Lane." The silence in the room was suffocating. The air was thick with tension, the board members all shifting uncomfortably, trying to process what I had just unleashed. And then I turned to leave. As I stepped toward the door, I heard No's voice, low and strained. You don't know what you're doing. Harper, you don't know what's going to happen if you push this. I stopped just before the door, my hand resting on the handle. I turned back, my gaze locking with his. I know exactly what's going to happen, Noah, I said, my voice a quiet threat. And for the first time, I'm not afraid anymore. I opened doors, stepping out into the hallway, knowing that whatever happened next, it was no longer my burden to carry. I had done what I set out to do, and now I was free.